right, so let's talk. This is going to be a whirlwind tour. Take notes if you want, but everything is going to be recorded and put on YouTube if you want to go back. Pre-filed legislation. We've not talked about this ever at a party breakfast meeting, but I think it's important because a new focus for our party over the next 2 years is to pay attention to the laws that are passed and the laws that everything that happens before they pass, debated and reviewed and amended, etc. Normally, we let the media guide where our attention goes. We always look at what the headlines are and focus on that. But there's a lot of things that happen that don't get the media coverage that I think it deserves, both good and bad. So this isn't just a legislation bashing session. This is a good, bad, and ugly. So we will talk about how this works and some of the things that I've been paying attention to. But let's start with the basics. I don't want to assume you know exactly how things happen in Colombia for a bill to become a law. And in many ways, it mirrors what happens at the federal level. So if you've watched Schoolhouse Rock and you saw that little I am a bill, much of it occurs the same way at the state level. So at the state, we have the House of Representatives, and there's 124 of them. We have 46 senators as well. They are separate bodies. Any one of them could file a bill. They could file multiple bills, not just one. They could file 0. They don't have to, but they can file whatever they want, but it has to be a member of the House or a member of the Senate. This is the life cycle of a bill. All right, now this is a lot of words. I'm not interested in looking at the words necessarily, but basically a bill gets sponsors. So one or more representatives or senators can sign on to a bill, and this is an example of a bill that has a lot of sponsors. This is the South Carolina Constitutional Carry Second Amendment Preservation Act of 2024. Yay. But all these representatives signed on says we want to sponsor this. Now the little graphic at the bottom shows you the path for a bill to become a law. It starts by getting submitted either at the House or in the Senate based on who's sponsoring it. In this case, it was the House, H 3594. The H stands for House. So it gets introduced. Then it goes to a committee. And in the committee, they debate it. Maybe it goes to a subcommittee in that committee. And they debate it some more, and then it comes back. And if the House approves it, then it has to go to the Senate for their review. And it goes to a committee in the Senate or a subcommittee in a committee and reviewed and debated and edited. And then maybe it goes back to the House to see if those revisions are acceptable. And the two sides negotiate. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very long process. There is no bill that gets rushed through. We may feel like it's rushed through, especially if it's a terrible bill that harms people. Even if it takes 10 months, it still feels very rushed. And we've seen some bills like that happen. But it takes a long time, and that's how our government is set up, so that you can't issue overnight legislation. It has to go through a lengthy process. And then finally, once the Senate and the House both agree, then it has to go to the governor, who still has a chance to veto a bill and say, nah, no good, kick it back, or he signs it and it moves forward. Talking about committees, there are a lot of committees. Look at this list. I ain't going to read it to you, but it's a lot. House committees, agriculture, judiciary, medical, military, public and municipal affairs, ways and means. Senate committees, just as many. And all the members serve on one or more committees. So there's a lot. So when these bills get filed, the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate, they pretty much decide what committee a bill goes to. If it's a bill about the law or maybe the justice system, go to the Judiciary Committee. If it's a law about farming, go to the Agriculture Committee. So he starts to divvy them up and send these bills off to the various committees. But committees can also be thought of as a graveyard where bills go to die. Here's a bill that we might know about, H 3005. It is the penalty enhancements for hate crimes. And if you can see by that little graphic, it was filed by just one representative, Representative Carter. It went into the House, it went to committee, and that's where it died. If it doesn't get passed in 2 years, at the end of that legislative cycle, all the bills are off the table. This bill was introduced and sat in committee and never got discussed. Never got brought up, never got voted upon, yay or nay. It didn't go anywhere. And that is the privilege of the chairs of each of these committees. Now, guess what party are the chairs of all the committees? They're all Republicans. That's what you get when you're a majority and your guy is in charge. You get to appoint the chairs of the committees, and they're all going to be members of your party. So you think a hate crimes bill is ever going to get out of a Republican-controlled committee? No, especially not after. Look, we had that massacre at Emmanuel AME, Mother Emanuel AME. And if that didn't get a hate crimes bill passed, I don't know what will. Right? I don't know what tragedy will occur. But anyhow, that's where most bills go to die. So this is the thing when the media talks about a bill and they say the House passed the bill. That doesn't mean it's law yet. Or when somebody says these legislators submitted a bill that does X, Y, Z. Well, okay, we can get all excited about it, but it's still got to go through a long process, and maybe it never gets out of committee. So that's why I want to try to keep the focus on these laws and where they stand in the process so we know who to call and how to act. This year in December, after the election, over 800 bills were pre-filed. So pre-filed means this is what they're going to discuss. Right? Yes, they can introduce new bills, but they get put at the back of the line throughout the year. These 800 plus bills, these get first dibs, and they've all been assigned to committees already. So next week, when the legislation comes back, is it next week or the week after? I think it's the week after. When the lawmakers come back, they get right to business and start going through these based on whatever the chair decides is the priority. So if the Judiciary Chair has 100 bills that were assigned to his committee, he gets to go through and says, today we're going to talk about this. Tomorrow we're going to talk about that. He decides the priority. Now, I've read all 800 plus bills because I have a lot of free time, and we're going to go through them. No, we're not. I'm just going to pick out some highlights, and even then, as I was trying to choose what to discuss, I left out some amazing proposed legislation. Amazing, both good and amazing, like, oh my God, I can't believe they submitted that. So I just picked a sample. So this is not my priority. It was just because we don't have 20 hours to talk about all 800. So I picked a few, and we're going to just look at those and then kind of open the door to future conversation about others. Anybody recognize this poster? Come on, you old timers, movie lovers. Anybody know what this is? Who? I hear it. This is that classic Clint Eastwood film, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yes, and that is how I've categorized the bills I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to do a few of each. Let's start with the good. H3193. This has the name of the Trump Criminal Background Records Check Ban Act, submitted by Representative Dr. Jermaine Johnson. Rather than me describe it, I'm going to let him describe it in his own words.
Also, I have already made contact with the policy writers at the State House. I will be proposing a bill. It's either going to be called Donald Trump's Law or the Trump Amendment. And this new bill that I'm going to be proposing will be to ban and forbid any employer in the state of South Carolina from asking for a background check or doing any criminal investigations on a potential employee. The reason being is we now have a 34-time convicted felon as the president-elect of the United States. If you can be a 34-time convicted felon and be the president of the United States of America, then I definitely don't need to have my background check to be a forklift driver. All right, so we need to not be hypocrites here. All right, we need to not be hypocrites, and it starts with the top. It starts with the top. We can no longer punish people for their rhetoric. those types of things that are going on. When your kids are at school and they're cursing and they're acting out, they now can say, hey, well, listen, the president of the United States does it. I also can do that. So we cannot be hypocrites. We must lead by example, and take the bad with the good.
So how many of you think this has a chance of passing? But sometimes you realize that laws or proposed bills are what they call performative. They're written to send a message and get publicity, get some media coverage. And when he proposed this back in December, I just had to laugh out loud. Makes sense to me. He's got the logic. The logic's all there. I can't find any fault with it, but I don't think it's going to be seen by anybody. Another good law. This is sponsored by Republican Representative Neil Collins. It's H 3329, a tax exemption on diapers and toilet paper. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there's one thing that all of us have used every day since our first day, it's been either a diaper or toilet paper. And so to have tax removed from those items, I'll take that as a good thing. So I'm actually considering that in support. The bill is very simple. It's just one line. It just says, add toilet paper and diapers to the list of sales tax exempted items. So I'm here for that. Republicans can have good ideas too. Next one. For those who are doctors and nurses, and if it's not too late, Representative Wendell Gilliard proposed a student loan forgiveness program for nurses and doctors. If you meet certain criteria, you're practicing in the state, funds will be made available by the state of South Carolina to forgive your student loan debt. That's great. Submitted by Democrat Representative Gilliard. I don't know if this has much of a chance, but I got to imagine there's a lot of Republican nurses and doctors that could benefit, and we have struggle filling those roles. So this could act as an incentive to bring those to practice in our state, bring some talented individuals to practice. So I think that's a good bill. And then the last good bill, require those who own or possess firearms to carry liability insurance. That's an interesting idea. We drive cars, we have houses, we're required to carry insurance. If you have a business or even a meeting like this, you have to have liability insurance in case somebody gets hurt or injured. Why not have that for guns? And in the case, and this is what the bill says, provide that residents of this state who own or possess firearms shall obtain and carry liability insurance that covers losses or damages resulting from any negligent or accidental use of the firearm. So we talk about kids getting access to the guns or people accidentally discharging their weapon and shooting their spouse or their aunt or whatever. To carry liability insurance kind of helps create that aura of responsibility of owning a deadly weapon. So I think that's interesting. I don't know it's going to get a lot of attention either. But again, that's going to be the case. A lot of the good bills that I saw in that 800 plus probably will not see the light of day, which is a shame. But you have to keep submitting it. You have to keep the fight alive and keep going at it time and time again. So those were 4 highlights of good bills. Let's talk about 3 bad bills. And bad actually has 2 meanings. I mean bad as in it's not good for us, and bad as in what a stupid bill. So we got a couple of examples of each. The first bad bill that I saw was to amend the South Carolina Constitution, which has very explicit language in it. Let me read this from our Constitution. It says, "No money shall be paid from public funds, nor shall the credit of the state or any of its political subdivisions be used for the direct benefit of any religious or other private educational institution." This is a pretty unique phrase. Not a lot of state constitutions have that, but South Carolina does. And year after year, the Republican lawmakers keep trying to divert public education money to the private schools. So along comes Senator Matt Lieber, who says, let's repeal that. Let's change our Constitution and get rid of it. And it has to go through a ballot initiative first. So this proposal says, let's put it on the 2026 ballot. A line that says, shall we repeal this from the state constitution? And if the people say yes, that opens the door for the lawmakers to proceed and adjust our Constitution, which doesn't get adjusted all that often, by the way. It's very rare that it does. So I consider that bad, as in bad for the people, bad for our public funds, and it's just going to enrich private for-profit institutions. We have another one, and this again comes from Representative Neil Collins, the same guy who did the taxes on diapers and toilet paper. He came up with this idea: let's abolish the South Carolina Board of Education. I don't think on principle it's a good thing. Now, given who our state superintendent is currently and that current board, I would actually be happy to see them all gone. But I think if we had good people in the board and a good superintendent of education, it can do a lot of good for our state. So I don't think I put this in a good category. I put this in a bad category. We just need to get good people into this board and not a state superintendent that signs up for PragerU without the input of anybody else, just did it unilaterally. So I call this bad legislation. And the last bad legislation is this guy, Mike Burns from Greenville. And he proposed a law that says we're going to ban food containing mRNA from being labeled as certified SC grown. Why is this bad? I'm going to let a young lady named Adrienne Lett describe this bill. She ran for state house last cycle as well. I think she's an up-and-comer in the state party. Let's hear from her.
I believe that I have found one of the stupidest bills that has been pre-filed in South Carolina for next year's legislative term. And that is House Bill 3172, proposed by Representative Burns.
Apologies for the small font, but pretty much this dude wants to ban the use of the certified SC grown designation on any food or food products that contain messenger ribonucleic acid, which is mRNA. However, literally anyone who has ever taken a rudimentary high school biology course knows that mRNA exists in every single living cell, meaning that mRNA already exists in every single piece of produce that you eat, every single piece of meat that you eat, every single grain, everything that's derived from those things contains mRNA. So apparently nothing can be labeled as certified South Carolina grown because every living thing contains mRNA. My incredibly generous assumption is that this bill was supposed to be targeting something related to mRNA vaccines and like livestock and stuff, because that has been a hot topic recently in the political realm. But again, this whole bill is a flop because it wants people to just magically deny fundamental biological principles. I hope he's embarrassed, because he should be. Let this be a reminder as to why scientific literacy is so important in politics and why we need more of it. Because what is this?
I love her. Adrienne Lett, she's on TikTok and she comes up with wonderful tidbits like that. So everything contains mRNA, which means nothing will ever get that certification. But when you have scientifically illiterate people running the show, those are the bills that we get submitted. And that wasn't the only example of this. I found a number of examples where the bills were written with language that actually does the opposite of what they intended, just because they're just not very good at it. And Mike Burns is one of those who's not good at it. All right, now the ugly, and these are the ones that are really damaging. H 3357, South Carolina Prenatal Equal Protection Act. This one gained national news. Basically, this is saying that you treat from the moment of conception as a full-grown human with all the rights therein, making every abortion, even from the second day of conception, a homicide, liable to the death penalty. So this was submitted by 6 white men who want to execute women who want to exercise reproductive freedoms. This got national attention. And yeah, it is terrible. In fact, I'm going to let another person talk about this a bit. This is a little video clip from Jessica Valenti. She is a feminist author and columnist who has been in this realm for many years, and she has some opinions.
You may have seen the news that South Carolina Republicans introduced a bill that would make having an abortion punishable by the death penalty. There's a lot of misinformation going around about the legislation. I wanted to make sure people knew what was actually happening. I actually broke the news of this story when Republicans first introduced this bill last year, and I believe I was the first person to write about it when they reintroduced it this year as well. But just to give you a a sense of what this is about. Yes, Republicans are introducing a bill that calls for the equal protection of fetuses under criminal law, meaning having an abortion would be classified as a homicide. And in South Carolina, punishment for a homicide can include the death penalty. The thing I think people need to be worried about is not that this bill is going to pass. It won't. It's not going to pass. The thing that people need to be worried about is the fact that Republicans are continually reintroducing legislation like this, not just in South Carolina, but in other states too, in order to numb Americans to their extremism. You know, they know this bill is not going to pass, but they also know the more times that they reintroduce it, the more accustomed we become to seeing legislation that says abortion should be punishable by the death penalty, right? And so years from now, when people are completely numb to it, that's when they'll try to pass it.
So some words from wisdom from a woman who's been following this for many years. Another ugly one comes from three white men, Travis Moore, Josiah Magnuson, and our own Representative John McCravey. For the first time that I've ever seen, a bill has been introduced with thousands of words to legally define biological sex. The bill starts by saying, whereas in human beings there are two and only two sexes, male and female, whereas every individual is either male or female, whereas there is increasing confusion about the definition and implications of sex as biological truth, and it goes on and on and on, and it sounds like something that was pulled from the Old Testament. Why this bill is necessary, he deems necessary, because he is on a crusade against the transgender population in our state and in our country. Basically, this legally rules out the existence of anyone who is transgender. And this is, I know it's a difficult topic for many, but when I see a marginalized group attacked by bullies in power, by the majority, I just feel compelled to stand and defend. Because we have had this cycle throughout the centuries in this country of minority groups, women, race, religion, persecuted by law, persecuted by those in power. This is our civil rights struggle this year and in recent years, and it's just going to continue, and it needs people to step up and fight against it. This is one of those that says we're going to legally make it so that transgender people don't have any legal definition whatsoever. None whatsoever. And for those of you that had the fortunate experience of seeing Oliver Goldsmith speak last year at our breakfast meeting, who's a local young man who went through a transition and spoke about his journey, the first to ever receive a standing ovation of all the speakers we've ever had. And I encourage you to go back to our YouTube channel and find it, because you'll gain a lot of understanding and empathy for the plight that transgender citizens go through, and this law is trying to define them out of existence. So thank you, John McCravey, for making that one of your priorities. Last ugly one comes from the Senate. We talked about diverting public funds to private and parochial schools. One House rep says, let's change the Constitution. These senators say, we're going to go at it another way. Since the state Supreme Court ruled it was illegal for the state to use public funds in any manner, they tried to do these school vouchers, and the state Supreme Court 3-2 said, nope. They're going back at it and saying, okay, we can't use the general fund. We could use lottery funds. That sits outside of the general fund. So if we want to get past the Supreme Court, we'll say that the money raised from the lottery, which was designed for public schools, we're going to take all of that, all of it, to private and parochial schools. They took the dollar amount, they took the requirements to receive it, they raised it all and expanded it, and they're trying to put even more money to go to private and religious schools. And they're going to say, well, the public schools will fund them from the general fund. But when it comes to budget time, who knows how much of that will get cut. It truly is going to decimate our public school system. So this is why I call this the ugly, and we want to watch this, but they are hell-bent on passing this again, and it will get challenged, and the Supreme Court has changed. The Supreme Court has changed in South Carolina, and it may have the makeup to pass it this time around. So we need to keep the pressure on and keep watching. All right, finally, I added a fourth category, and we'll wrap up with this, the weird. We like to go about weird laws. Remember, we can't have a horse in a bathtub in South Carolina? Remember that law? That trivia question? Well, here are some weird bills that have been submitted. Representative Bill Chumley has submitted a bill to create an African American Confederate Veterans Monument. Any African Americans in the group here? Any of y'all ask for a Confederate Veterans Monument for your ancestors? So here's how he starts the bill. But listen to what he wrote. Whereas the South Carolina General Assembly finds that the contributions, listen to this, the contributions made by African Americans in service to the state of South Carolina during the war between states are not reflected in South Carolina social studies and academic standards. And while there is representation of those African Americans from South Carolina who took up arms for the Union, there is nothing to show the contributions, sacrifices, and honor of their Confederate counterparts. Ladies and gentlemen, this has to be one of the most ridiculous bills I've ever seen. In service. Thank you for your service. Okay, that's enough on that one. Here's another interesting bill. We are looking to decriminalize young pinball players. Did you know it was a crime, a status offense for a misdemeanor or felony if committed by by a young person under 18? It's under 18. It is on the law that it is illegal, and you could go to juvie if you are caught playing pinball. State Representative Todd Rutherford says, yeah, let's get rid of that. Can we get rid of that law? Let our young people play pinball. Yeah, this was wild. Here was the law. It was basically calling it a status offense that was to include incorrigibility, truancy, running away, playing or loitering in a billiard room, playing a pinball machine, or gaining admission to a theater by false identification. All they're looking to do is strike pinball machines from that list. All right, H 3578, submitted by Representative Michael Rivers, mandating the teaching of cursive writing, because we have so many problems in our state that could be fixed if only 2nd through 5th graders knew how to write in cursive. Now listen, I grew up in the Catholic education system. I literally had, this isn't a rumor, those of you who went to Catholic school know, none hit my hand with a ruler if my cursive writing wasn't good. I know cursive writing. I'm not in favor of this bill. I see some of you applauding in the audience. Maybe you're in favor of it. I just think that in this time and day, this is a weird one to put in the list of things that we need in this state. But we'll keep an eye on it for you. We'll see how far this goes. Finally, prohibition on weather control with chemtrails. Anybody familiar with the chemtrails conspiracy theory? Well, Representative Gil Gatch, this is what he wrote. To amend the South Carolina Code of Laws. He says, whereas it is documented that the federal government or other entities acting on the federal government's behalf may conduct geoengineering experiments by intentionally dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere, and those activities may occur within the state of South Carolina, let us ban the unlawful discharge of air contaminants so as to prohibit the emission whose purpose is to affect temperature, weather, or sunlight intensity. This is what Mr. Gatch is worried about. Who knows? We may be banned from spraying aerosols into the air to control the sunlight. These are the same people that thought Hurricane Helene was intentionally created by Democrats. Have you heard that theory? Because it wiped out southern red states. And it was an attempt by the Democrats at the federal government to interfere with the elections. Now, if the Democrats were going to do that, they would have done it like a month later, like during the election week itself, right? But no, we goofed up. We did it too early. And everybody recovered and got to vote. All right, so what do? 5 things that we can do with these pre-filed laws. 1, pay attention. Watch social media, follow us online, Facebook, email, newsletter. I introduced my personal account, Political Bill SC. You will find that on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, wherever. I'm watching these bills. I'm watching the debates. I'll be posting clips online every day. Spread the knowledge. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to your family members. Write letters to the editor saying, what a stupid bill by Gil Gatch. Or what a great bill to learn about handwriting in schools. We're in favor. But publicize it. Talk about it. Make people aware of it. We should contact the lawmakers. Somebody approached me just today and says, you know what? Who was it? Mr. Jones. Where are you, George? He pulls me aside and says, you know what? Even though we may not have any Democrats representing us locally, we should still engage with them and let our opinions be known. So as much as it may hurt your hand to write a letter to Senator Billy Garrett, cause cramps in your hand as you're writing to John McCravey, right? Cause you to have nightmares and visions. Maybe we should do so anyway and let them know where we stand. There's always opportunity to testify at hearings. If you can make it to Columbia and there's a particular bill that you're passionate about, education, healthcare, whatever, they will take public testimony and you will get your words on record and help persuade the lawmakers. And then finally, the best way is to run for office. Be a lawmaker yourself or get deeply involved in supporting a candidate.